If you have no idea who Maegor Brightflame is, then congratulations, there may be some hope for you yet. If you already know who he is, well done. But if you don't, and you want to join the elite club of unhealthy obsessives who spend way too much time thinking about a decades-old book series, then allow me to present today's bout of manic procrastination. Maegor Brightflame has only been mentioned by name once, and that was in a book that wasn't even fully written by Gurm. Almost nothing is known about him besides his name, his parentage, and a brief appearance at the Council of 232. Despite the fact that he is less than a footnote, I still want to ask the question, where in the world is Maegor Brightflame? First, the few bits of info we do have. Maegor's dad, Aerion, was a Targaryen prince born about a century before the start of the main series, who took the moniker Brightflame. He appears in the first Dunk and Egg short story, where he is cruel and violent. After the events of that book, he is sent into exile in Lys for a bit, but comes back in time to fight in the Third Blackfire Rebellion in 219. In 232, he has his first and only legitimate child, a son who he names Maegor, probably just to annoy everyone because nobody likes Maegor the Cruel. Then, later that year, he drinks wildfire, believing it will turn him into a dragon. Spoiler alert, it doesn't, and he dies. Shortly after, King Maegor dies too, and a great council is called to select his successor. By the rules of male-only primogeniture, the infant Maegor Brightflame is by all accounts the rightful heir, but he is passed over in favour of Aerion Brightflame's younger brother, Egg, who will become Aegon V. And that's the last we hear of Maegor Brightflame. If Maegor was still alive at the start of the series, he would be around 66 years old, which is pretty old, but far from impossible, especially in this series. So, based on the near zero information we have about Maegor, can we pinpoint which of the many characters in the main series he could be? Well, obviously not. Because of the complete lack of any evidence, there aren't going to be any firm conclusions we can draw. Instead, I'll just be throwing some candidates at the wall, and you can decide for yourself if any stick. First, let's address the most obvious place Maegor could be, 6 feet under. After all, we never hear anything of him again after the Great Council of 232, and there would certainly be some powerful people who would want him out of the way. As the rightful claimant to the throne, he poses a threat to Aegon V's shaky regime. Considering that the lords of the realm preferred Aemon, a childless 40-year-old maester, to his younger brother, and given that they are suspicious of Aegon and think he's a weird peasant, his rule doesn't have the strongest foundations, so having a rival around with a stronger claim on the throne than the king's would be an unacceptable risk. True, Maegor's an infant and people are worried that he might grow up to be insane. That's the reason they passed over him in the first place, after all. But both of those problems are temporary. If Aegon allows him to live and he grows up and isn't insane, then why is Aegon in charge again? The whole justification for Aegon's kingship would be fatally undermined. It would be much easier to just kill him. However, the big piece of evidence stacked against this is Aegon V's personality. He's a nice lad for the most part, compassionate, friendly, and learns from the paragon of knightly decency, Duncan the Tall. We know Egg better than most historical characters, and killing an infant child just doesn't seem like the kind of thing he would do. The World Book confirms that he didn't lose his compassion with age, as he spends his reign attempting to improve the lives of the peasants who he grew up with. Most telling of all, Aegon's first act as king is to banish Bloodraven to the Wall for the crime of murdering Aenys Blackfire, who had been offered safe passage to stake his claim at the Great Council. Basically the exact same crime Aegon would be committing if he killed Maegor, in fact even worse as Maegor was a baby. The gesture of banishing Bloodraven, supposed to restore faith in the crown's word, would be rendered meaningless if Aegon simultaneously was slaughtering infants. Of course, it's possible someone other than Aegon killed baby Maegor. Maybe Bloodraven did that too, though you would think if he did, Aegon would make sure to pin the murder on him, just so no one suspected the crown of doing it. Alternatively, Maegor could just have died naturally. And if you still think that Aegon might have killed him, there is one thing you could use as evidence, a famous quote of Maester Aemon's. He tells Jon that the day he left for the Wall, shortly after Aegon was proclaimed king, Aemon told his brother to kill the boy within you and let the man be born. Jon takes the message as a metaphor, but perhaps it was more than metaphorical for Aegon. Anyway, with that horrible character assassination of two of the most wholesome Targaryens in the entire series out of the way, let's assume that Aegon is actually a nice bloke and didn't kill a baby, even if Aemon was hinting that he should. What would he do with Maegor instead? As we've said, keeping him around is dangerous, as if he grows up and isn't insane, he'll pose a threat. Sending him away to some other lord is also not great, as it gives them a claimant to the throne they can use against the crown. And given all the rebellions in Aegon's reign, if he was being looked after by a lord, he'd likely have been used as a pawn by the rebels. The fact that we don't hear about that suggests that he wasn't. Instead, it seems more likely that Aegon would have sent the baby somewhere he could be anonymous, well looked after and lead a normal life, safe from political machinations. Luckily for Aegon, there are lots of orders in Westeros you can join which involve forsaking any claims to landed titles, and not having kids to boot, meaning you can get rid of potentially problematic rivals to the succession. Unless he wants a baby on his Kingsguard, the options available to Aegon are the Night's Watch, the Faith, and the Maesters. Let's take the first one first. Throughout the series, the Night's Watch is the go-to place to send people you need to get rid of without killing. Ned, Tyrion, and Theon are all offered the chance to go to the Wall, though in the end none of them do end up actually going. It's also used specifically to disinherit people, notably Sam Tarly. But the clincher here is that Targaryens have often considered it as a viable option to deal with unwanted successors. Spoilers for House of the Dragon, by the way, skip to the time on screen to avoid them. When Rhaenyra takes the capital, she's advised by Corlys Velaryon to offer pardons to Aegon II and his brothers if they take the Black. She ends up refusing, but when Aegon II takes over, he plans to do the same with her son Aegon, the future Aegon III. When things take a turn for the worse and it looks like Aegon II is about to be deposed, Corlys advises him to abdicate and go to the Wall, which the king probably considered. Side note here, Aegon II planned to offer Aegon III a choice between the Wall on one hand and castration and becoming a court eunuch on the other, so maybe the same thing happened to Maegor Brightflame. And who is the only court eunuch we know about in the main series, who is already widely speculated by insane people to be a member of a branch of the Targaryen dynasty? Step forward, Varys Brightflame. Unfortunately, Varys Brightflame makes absolutely no sense, for too many reasons to get into here, so let's get back to the main insanity. Those three examples from the time of the dance were suggested by Aegon II and Corlys Velaryon, not exactly people known for being overly concerned with the North and the Watch, whereas we know Aegon V is sympathetic to the North, as he sent them a bunch of food during the long winter of 230 to 236, and probably went to Winterfell in the unwritten 4th Dunk and Egg book. And if you want an example that's less historical, besides Sam Tarly, Jon Snow is the ultimate unwanted rival claimant sent to the Watch. If he's Rhaegar and Lyanna's son, that makes him a rival claimant to the Iron Throne, explaining Ned's desire to get him out of the way for his own safety. Everyone else thinks Jon is Ned's bastard, so to them, and in particular Catelyn, sending him to the Wall stops him from becoming a threat to Robb. And if you want something even more explicit, then there's Aemon, who joins the Night's Watch specifically so that he won't be used against his will as a rival to Aegon V. And that brings me on to the next major reason to send Maegor Brightflame to the Wall. Two other Targaryens are headed there anyway immediately after the Great Council of 232, Bloodraven and Maester Aemon. Why not send Maegor with them? Well, there are a couple of reasons. One is that the Wall isn't a particularly good place for a baby, especially in winter, and we're told that 232 was in the middle of a particularly harsh winter. Travelling from King's Landing all the way to the Wall also probably wouldn't be a great idea for an infant. Also, Great Uncle Bloodraven probably isn't top of your list of emergency babysitters, especially after you've just banished him from the realm. Of course, strategically, letting the baby die by sending it to the most inhospitable part of the country might be a good idea, but we've just outlined that kind-hearted Aegon probably wouldn't want to do that. Then there's the fact that of the three options we're looking at, the Night's Watch is the only one where baby Maegor could expect to be trained how to fight, and potentially rise to a position where he might command troops, maybe even as Lord Commander eventually, which could be a problem if he decided to press his claim. Admittedly, that doesn't seem to have stopped all the other people we mentioned being offered the chance to go to the Wall, but still, it might be a concern for Aegon. So sending Maegor to the Watch has problems, but let's have a look for some candidates anyway. You might say that surviving for 66 years on the Wall is a tough ask, but Melisandre tells us that the Wall has a magical aura, and Aemon suggests that being there is what kept him alive so long. Assuming Maegor was sent to the Wall and didn't die before the story started, who could he be? We can rule out most of the Watchmen either for their age or because they have backstories from before they were sent to the Wall. For example, Jeor Mormont and Ulmer of the Kingswood are probably around the right age, but didn't join the Watch as babies. In fact, there is only one character off the top of my head who we know did join the Watch as a baby, and that's Mance Rayder. One of the backstories attributed to Mance by Corrin Halfhand is that he was captured from a band of wildling raiders by the Night's Watch. Like a lot of things about Mance, it's a bit odd. Why did the wildlings take their baby on a raiding mission? Did they climb the Wall with him? Why did the Night's Watch keep baby Mance rather than sending him somewhere he might be better looked after and not be a drain on the Watch's resources? Where did they even get the milk to feed him? If in fact baby Mance was Maegor and showed up with Bloodraven and Aemon, that would answer all these questions. They kept the baby around and had the infrastructure in place to raise him because it had been planned out ahead of time. It would also be a smart move for the Targaryens to pass Maegor Brightflame off as a wildling captured by the Night's Watch, as it would make it unlikely he'd ever be put in a position of power due to mistrust of wildlings, and would give Maegor a cover story for why he's there in the first place. Aside from that, Mance wears black and red, the Targaryen colours, and he's old, with grey hair. But probably not old enough. After all, being Maegor would make him 68 when he beats Jon in the sword fight and dance while disguised as Rattleshirt. True, there's a few old characters in A Song of Ice and Fire who continue to be fighting fit long after they probably should be, for example Barristan, and maybe the magic of the wall kept Mance youthful. So the age thing doesn't kill the theory stone dead, but it is a big mark against it. Is there anyone else on the wall who could be Maegor? There's a few old characters like Old Henley, Young Henley, Blaine, and so on, who have no backstory and therefore could be Maegor, but there's no evidence for or against, and they're incredibly minor background characters, so what would really be the point? The only other possible Maegor on the wall who's halfway interesting is Clydas. Clydas is estimated by Jon to be 60 if he's a day, which implies that he's at least 60, so could well be in his late 60s as Maegor would be. He also has pink eyes, which is a bit Valyrian-ish, and he worked with Aemon for years, which would make sense if he is actually Maegor and was being looked after by his uncle Aemon. His predecessor as Castle Black's maester, Aemon, turned out to be a secret Targ, so why not Clydas as well? Unlike with Mance, who is already a pretty important character and so making him secretly Maegor kind of has to have a point, with Clydas he could just be Maegor and it would be a fun little Easter egg. Before we leave the wall, one last candidate to throw out there. Maegor Brightflame is bolstered by Clydas' connection to Aemon, but what about the other Targaryen who went north in 232, Bloodraven? Are there any Night's Watchmen connected to him? Well, there is one. Cold Hands. A 20-year-old Maegor could have gone with Bloodraven when he went north of the wall in 252. Bloodraven would probably have wanted to keep an eye on him after all. If Maegor then died, he could have become Cold Hands, hence having died 50-ish years before the start of the story, or long ago, as Leaf says. Turning from the Night's Watch, what about the Faith? This isn't an option we hear about much when it's time to get rid of unwanted claimants. House of the Dragon spoilers again, skip to the time, etc., blah blah blah. Corlys recommends to Rhaenyra that Queens Helena and Alicent join the Faith, but it doesn't seem to be a favoured option for male claimants. We know from Aemon that the High Septon in 232 was willing to undo Aemon's vows so that he might become king, so putting Maegor in the hands of the Faith might not work if they're willing to just control Zed the Oaths that are the whole reason Maegor would be sent there in the first place. So why am I considering this at all? Mostly just to dismiss it. But if anyone in the Faith is going to be secretly someone else, it's probably the High Sparrow. Evidence? He's, old. Maegor would be old. That's pretty much it. The High Sparrow's actions do seem to be working against the established powers in King's Landing, and therefore might be in service of someone else, perhaps young Griff. Probably therefore working with Varys, who, as we said earlier, is also Maegor, so there could be a Brightflame Blackfire alliance going on. Oh, and the elder brother is Richard Lonmouth. There's other Faith people who could be Maegor, but no evidence, so let's turn to the group I've been saving till last, the Maesters. Like the Faith, the Maesters disown claims to land and titles, discard their last names, and don't learn how to fight. Aemon has been a Maester for over 20 years, so probably knows some people who he'd trust to look after baby Maegor. It's safer than the Watch, less powerful than the Faith, and has already been used in the past to get rid of 2 spare heirs, Aemon and earlier Aegon, son of Jaehaerys. We know a lot of Maesters at the Citadel and throughout Westeros, lots of them are pretty old, but do any of them seem like they could be Maegor? We really have nothing to go on for Maegor's personality, given that he was a baby the last time we saw him, but suppose he did follow in his dad's footsteps to some extent, being a bit mad, interested in dragons and magic and weird stuff like that. Are there any old Maesters who fit that description? Well, yes. One. Marwyn the Mage. Marwyn could be in his late 60s. He's described as having white hair coming out of his ears. He's big into dragons and magic and all that, travelling to Ashai and wanting to go support Daenerys. He's a bit mental, seeing conspiracies everywhere. He certainly stands out from the rest of the Maesters, and is mentioned long before he appears, in Thrones by Mirri Maz Duur and in Storm by Qyburn, both of whom are weird eccentrics. Marwyn is also interested in visions. He has his glass candle and claims to have found lost records of the visions of Daenys the Dreamer. This is a link to his possible father Aerion, who Aemon tells us had visions that led to him drinking wildfire and killing himself in order to get a dragon, much like how Marwyn is obsessed with the dragons. And most compelling of all, take the last bit of Marwyn's infamous conspiratorial rant. Ask yourself why Aemon Targaryen was allowed to waste his life upon the wall, when by rights he should have been raised to Archmaester. His blood was why. He could not be trusted. No more than I can. Is Marwyn the Maegor implying that he can't be trusted because of his blood? Because he's a Targaryen, son of Maegor Brightflame, true heir to the Iron Throne? Well, probably not. But what do you think? Do you think Maegor is still kicking around somewhere? Is he just some incredibly minor background character who will make no impact on the story but is just there for Gurm's own amusement? Or is he a more important character who will make a difference? Is he Mance? The High Sparrow? Marwyn? Or did Aegon kill him as a baby? Or are the 2 sentences we have about him the full extent of the thought Gurm has devoted to this non-character, and all of this is a colossal waste of time? Well, I know it's the last one, but let me know what you think in the comments below. Until next time, thanks for watching.